Okay, I think we're finally ready for class to start. So, good afternoon. Welcome to the Committee on Government Affairs. Thank you all for joining us. And would the secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw. Senator Goycochea. Senator Neal. Senator Hansen. Senator Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. And please mark Vice Chair Orenshaw present when he arrives. He is out presenting bills, and this is that time of year where we're all in and out, so please be patient with us. We're actually going to take the agenda out of order. So we will start with Assembly Bill 103, and we will welcome Assemblywoman Martinez. As a reminder, as she's getting ready, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And if you're joining us online, please, if you're in support or opposition or neutral, listen to the directions and they will guide you through that. Thank you. Go ahead when you're ready, and welcome to Government Affairs.
Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop and members of the committee. For the record, I am Susie Martinez representing Assembly District 12, and I'm pleased to present Assembly Bill 103 for your consideration. I also need to let you know that I'm also going to probably step out. I'll try to stay as long as I can, but I also have to run back to my committee as well. So thank you for your patience. So with me today is Michonne Eben from the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, who will assist me with the presentation. I also have Marla McDade-Williams from Strategies 360, who will be able to answer any technical questions that the committee may have. Assembly Bill 103, which revises provisions governing the preservation of certain prehistoric sites, clarifies technical language from the bipartisan legislation passed in 2017. Senate Bill 244 from 2017 provided that a person shall not knowingly excavate a prehistoric Native American burial site on private lands without first obtaining a permit from the museum director of the Nevada State Museum. However, a person who is engaging in a lawful activity on private lands, including, without limitation, construction, mining, lodging, or farming, is not required to obtain a permit to engage in that lawful activity. The museum director is required to provide notice and consult with the applicable Native American tribes throughout the permitting process. Prior to passage of SB 244, Nevada Native American tribes were overlooked on how their sacred burial sites were treated. Assembly Bill 103 attempts to fulfill the intent of Senate Bill 244 by helping protect sacred prehistoric Native American burial sites. This bill provides that such a permit is not required to engage in certain lawful activities on such private lands if those activities are exclusively for the purpose of other than excavating of a prehistoric Indian burial site and occur only on a portion of the private land that does not contain the known prehistoric Indian burial site. I would now like to turn over my presentation to Michonne Eben from the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, who will provide additional testimony to this bill. Michonne?
Good afternoon. Welcome to Government Affairs, and please go ahead when you're ready. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Ms. Chairman and committee members, thank you for your time and opportunity for me to present our perspective and thoughts. My name is Michonne R. Eben, and I am the Cultural Resource Manager for the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony is in full support of the proposed legislation in AB 103. As the Cultural Resource Manager, my duties include the protection, preservation, and management of Native American ancestral remains, funerary objects, cultural resources, and traditional cultural properties. Our rich history and heritage have been passed down from our ancestors, many of whom are buried throughout the state of Nevada in their final resting places. The core theme of AB 103 is to ensure protection of our ancestors' final resting places, where they were originally buried, and to ensure Nevada tribes are part of the discussions and decisions made affecting the management, treatment and disposition of Native American ancestral human remains and funerary objects on private property. We believe that AB 103 is another significant step for the state to recognize that tribes too have a standing in regards to our cultural heritage. The understanding of Native American culture has often been reduced to a collection of unearthed artifacts, with science providing its own theories and opinions that has disincluded Native American. There are snippets of appearances in Western TV shows and movies resulting in inaccurate stereotypes of Native people and their lives. Past Native culture is far richer and more complex than generally appreciated. Native American remains and sacred objects were desecrated by early pioneers and settlers. But what remains throughout this beautiful state is still important to the contemporary Native American societies. Our native ancestral remains and cultural items should be respected just as any human remains are respected in any cemetery. In Native American culture, when an individual dies, there are several significant aspects to the transition from the physical world to the spiritual world. First, there are certain rites and traditions that take place at the time of death. Then, during the dead's journey to the spirit world and at the place of burial. In addition, the relatives that are left behind partake in important ceremonies for the loss of their dead relative. When the dead is laid to its eternal resting place here on earth, that is where they are to remain undisturbed. These same ancestors were buried in their traditional societies in a traditional way. These are considered our Native American cemeteries. The current existing tribal communities still carry on these traditions, and we are very spiritually connected to these age-old customs. Our dead ancestors have a direct connection to our communities, to the earth, to nature, and to us as the living. Every year, I've had several Reno citizens that call me, and some politely offer their cultural findings on their private properties to our Reno Sparks Indian Colony. And then I have had others ask if we could purchase these items back. The latter part is offensive and very disturbing. Our culture is not for sale. For far too long, Native American culture has been minimized, theorized, and put on display. It seems that our culture is glorified and then it becomes a curiosity. Although AB 103 is limited to Native American human remains, there is no protection of our cultural items, and this is something we would like to change in the future. We are requesting respectful communication with private landowners to identify any potential adverse impacts to our buried ancestors and them to cooperatively decide the appropriate protection and disposition of our ancestors. Our spiritual practices and relationship with our past relatives has the same meaningful connection that you all have to your ancestors. Our traditional burial practices are no different from any other people's practices and of the past or even today. We are asking for mutual respect for our dead relatives. Please support AB 103, and thank you for this time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And Ms. Martinez, do you have any other comments, or would you like me to go to questions from the committee?
Questions would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee questions? Senator Neal, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I remember this bill from 2017, and there was a lot of conflict just to get to the existing language around the permit. So I was listening to the testimony, but where is the museum on the change?
Please go ahead and state your name for the record. Thank you. Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me okay now?
Now
Okay,
we got you. Thank you.
For the record, this is Marla McDade-Williams with Strategies 360 here today on behalf of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. So if you look at Section 1, NRS 381-196, subsection 1, it talks about a person obtaining a permit from a known prehistoric burial site. And at the time when this language was put in place, we had negotiated with the Nevada Mining Association, Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Story County to ensure that they wouldn't be asked to get a permit if they weren't excavating at the site. So if you had a 500-acre property and you're excavating, you're doing something on the far north corner, but the burial site is on the far southern corner, you wouldn't be asked to get a burial permit because you weren't excavating at the site. So what happened was this provision got interpreted to be an exemption. So you could excavate at the site, for example, put a pool over. There was a story done in 2019. If a landowner knew the site was there and they wanted to put a pool in, they didn't need a permit because there was an interpretation that this particular section provided an exemption from getting a permit. So that's what we're here to do now, is just kind of close the door on an exemption and clarify that as long as the activity occurs on a portion of the land that does not contain the known site, you don't need a permit. And I think there's been some confusion about the term known. Under current law, when you were excavating at a site and you may have inadvertently found remains, you're doing development, you inadvertently found remains, there's a process that kicks in where, as you can recall from the previous session, the State Office of Historic Preservation gets involved, and then they find the locus, the culturally affiliated tribe, and they discuss how to handle those remains, and then they catalog it. They don't catalog it in a public database for the public to see. They catalog it in a database that the Office of Historic Preservation maintains. But the landowner now knows that, if there was a decision to leave those remains in place but bury them deeper, the landowner knows that they're there. So it would be in that situation when the landowner wants to come back and excavate over that site where they would have to get a permit. But if you're a landowner doing this anywhere and you didn't know it was there, let's say that land changed hands and the information didn't get carried forward somehow, and the new landowner doesn't know that that site was there, there's no consequence, because once they do discover it again, it still falls under the inadvertent findings of Chapter 383 of the NRS. So there's the onus on the landowner in subsection 2 is simply if they know it's there, they have to get a permit. If they don't know it's there, there's no consequence, because once they found them again, it would be an inadvertent finding.
So thank you for that. So I get what the solution is, but why not add to, like, if you find any kind of artifacts or remains, that it is then a part of the deed or plot or title transfer, that, because when it's first found, it's documented typically, but so let's just say in the scenario where it's first found and then it becomes known and then it's not an inadvertent finding on the second finding, why not try to tie something to the land description and make sure that any conveyance has to specifically, explicitly say that this is there and where it's found, right? So then no matter who lives, dies, grandchildren, stranger, it's always carried forward, and it's always carried forward in the county records for the land that's being conveyed. Like, I'm just saying, in addition to what you have in this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Marla McDade Williams, if I can respond to Senator Neal. I don't disagree that that's a great idea. I just know that at this point in time, we haven't dealt with any real estate law to really understand how that would go into effect. And I think we're happy to look at it and consider it out into the future if that is a solution. But, for now, this is the system that's in place, and it seems to work. But again, we are open to looking at that out into the future if that's something that we should be doing.
I definitely think you should be thinking about it. There's land surveying that goes on all the time.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Any other questions? Senator Gokachia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just need to follow up on where Senator Neal was headed. My concern would be, and especially if we were dealing with large tracts and you were going to put actually something in the title, you'd have to narrow it down to where you're talking about 10 acres or 40 acres, or clearly some ranches, especially out in our area in eastern Nevada, well could have a burial site. Would you require a permit then for the whole 10,000 acres, say? So it would get down to, it's different than dealing with a lot or maybe even a 40 acres, but I could see, but I agree, it would be good to know if you were buying a piece of property, if there was a corner there that was a recognized, a known prehistoric Indian burial site. It would be nice to know when you bought it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Hansen.
I got a question. Might be for legal, actually. Does this apply only to prehistoric Indian things? The reason I bring it up is my grandfather years ago told me a really disgraceful tale about we had a Chinese cemetery in Reno. It was right across where Hug High School is now, where a trailer park is. And as the Chinese population really declined in this area, the city of Reno would actually dump all their sewage sludge on top of on top of the Chinese cemetery, and eventually it was buried and disappeared, and now there's a big trailer park there. And I bet you just about nobody knows, and he fought it back, and this has been in the 1930s. He fought that really aggressively, but I'm just wondering, is there any laws dealing with, that wouldn't be prehistoric, obviously, that would be contemporary, but I'm wondering, this law doesn't deal with that type of a situation, would it?
For the record, this is Heidi Clarkson with the Legislative Council Bureau. No, this bill just deals with prehistoric Indian burial sites.
Is there any laws in Nevada about a situation like I was just describing?
I would have to double check, but I'm not aware of any, but I can look into that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. How many of these, Ms. McDade, how many of these sites are there? Do we know? Or Ms. Even, do you know how many sites there are?
Yes, Michonne Eben, for the record. Well, actually, when we worked on the 2017 legislature, we were able to look at, work with the Nevada State Museum, coming up with protocols of not only their permitting process, but also taking a look at looking at them doing, I guess, a literature search of what we know of known sites. I do know a couple things. I'm not sure exactly how many sites we have. We do know that there are several burials out there. We also do know that through the State Historic Preservation Office, they have a system. It's called CRIS, the Cultural Resources system. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name right now. That provides confidential information of known burial sites. But they also have those sites that are all. It's not only for state; it's for federal, public, private, and state, I guess. And then I do know that since the 2017 legislature that we passed back then, we do know that there's been one permit given out by the Nevada State Museum. I hope that answers. Marla, can you add to that? I'm not sure if I answered correctly.
For the record, Marla McDade Williams. I can't really add to that. I guess the only thing I would say, and it would kind of go back to Senator Hansen's question, Nevada's law was based on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act that the federal government had enacted for protecting these sites on federal land. And so this legislation, although there was a small, what they call NAGPRA law in place in Nevada statutes, that's what this builds on, is the state NAGPRA. But it then built on it even more because that to apply to private land, which we did in 2017. But I'd say there are hundreds of sites listed in NVCRIS. And again, it's not a public database that anybody can go in and find information.
I thank you very much for that information. I guess I was trying to process if I didn't know where the sites were, right? And there's hundreds of them. And I was very interested in preserving, but I didn't know where they were. I was trying to know how I would ascertain that information so that I could be not only helpful to the process, but that if I bought something, I would be able to be assured that it was either, yes, it was a site or not, so that I could be helpful to the process.
For the record, Marla McDade Williams. I think there's probably a process in place where someone could work with NBCRIS and identify the current sites. But I do know that, one of the reasons that it's not made public is because you don't want people to desecrate them either, right? And so that's the importance of that.
So true in this world, so true. Thank you. Any additional questions, Senator Gocochea?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it just kind of piques my interest as we move into this. But, there are probably thousands of sites across eastern Nevada. I know in Newark Valley and the Rubies, and, they're typically, these aren't cemeteries or burial grounds. It's where I know of at least two that my family has discovered over the years, and so, but they're typically, in many cases, just a lone grave. And so, it's problematic to, it was the custom and culture. It's how it was.
Any additional questions from the committee? Any other thoughts? Then I will go to Ms. Eben. Any other thoughts before we go to support, opposition, and neutral?
Michonne Eben, for the record, I would just like to say, thank you. Thank you for hearing this out, and I appreciate all the senators' comments. Exactly what the Senator Gocochea just said is that our ancestors are buried everywhere, and sometimes they were alone. I've been doing this cultural resource management, the science side of our culture, for 20 years plus. And over this time, there has been several, I wouldn't say in the hundreds during my job, for one tribe, and knowing that we have come across areas where we had thought, and the science had thought, project proponents had thought there had not been human remains, and actually there would be. There ended up being unanticipated discoveries. And I also would like to say that, there's not always going to be a discovery, and we always hope that there isn't. We just want to make sure that that when this does take place, that our Native American culture is protected, preserved, and managed, and that we collaborate together to coordinate what's the best disposition for our Native American remains with the private landowner. So thank you for this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. With that, we will go to support, and I don't know that I have anybody in the room who is wanting to come forward, so we may go right to Zoom or online phone calls, broadcasting, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. If you would like to testify in support of AB 103, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 130, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 103. Nevada is made up of lands that our Indigenous neighbors have been stewards of for generations. Our state must pass this legislation to show the proper respect to our neighbors, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
For those of you that just joined us, we are currently taking support on AB 103. If you would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll move to opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 103, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 672, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 672, please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. Please begin.
Hello, my name is Teresa Melendez, Teresa, T-E-R-E-S-A, Melendez, M-E-L-E-N-D-E-Z, and I'm calling in support for this very important bill. I just wanted to share one sentiment, and that is I'm happy to see so many tribal impact bills this legislative session. I think it's incredibly important as we work to acknowledge, recognize, and honor the Indigenous people of the state, and that our leaders within the Assembly and in the state are acknowledging the Indigenous voices and helping to find solutions and uplift solutions and pass solutions to issues that are important to the sovereign nations, the tribal nations of the state. And we often hear about, allies and communities looking for ways to support tribal nations. And here we are during this legislative session when there are several tribal impact bills, when the tribes are coming out and tribal leaders are coming out, and knowledgeable, influential people like Michonne and Marla are speaking up on behalf of the tribal nations to help advance tribal issues. And so it's these times when we need our elected officials to stand up with the tribal nations and tribal leaders within the state to help move legislation forward that positively impacts tribal sovereignty and the needs of the Indigenous people of this land. With that, I appreciate your time. Thank you for bringing forward this legislation, and thank you to the committee. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. And just to confirm with the secretary that Ms. Melendez was in support. Okay, is there anybody in opposition?
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 103, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 103, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to closing remarks. Ms. McDade-Williams, please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Marla McDade-Williams. I just wanted to draw your attention to the exhibits on Nellis for this bill. There are quite a few letters of support from the local tribal communities. And I don't know if Michonne has any additional closing remarks. But thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Eben. Do you have any closing remarks?
This is Michonne Eben. No, not at this time. Just again, thank you very much for hearing us.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us here in Government Affairs today. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 103. And just on cue, our very own Assemblywoman Peters has joined us for Assembly Bill 86. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. For the record, I am Sarah Peters, representing Assembly District 24 in the heart of Reno. It's my pleasure today to present Assembly Bill 86 in its first reprint. The bill makes various changes relating to the recovery of certain expenses and costs incurred in extinguishing certain fires and emergencies. With me today to present the bill is Terry Taylor, a fire arson investigator and a certified wildland fire investigator with over 25 years of experience. Assembly Bill 86 was proposed by the committee to conduct an interim study concerning wildfires. It was my pleasure to serve as a member on this important committee during the 2019-2020 interim. The committee was created by Assembly Concurrent Resolution 4 during the 2019 legislative session. It was tasked with considering methods of reducing wildfire fuels, issues related to early responses to wildfires, and the economic impact of wildfires on the state and local communities. The committee consisted of 3 members of the Senate, 3 members of the Assembly, and 2 non-voting members. In its final meeting and work session on July 2nd, 2020, the committee recommended to address numerous wildfire-related issues. One of the recommendations is AB 86. AB 86 will help to recover costs from fighting fires caused by persons who acted in a criminal or negligent manner. With the chair's indulgence, I will provide some brief background information. The committee received written recommendation by the Nevada chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators that addressed issues related to the recovery of certain costs related to wildfires by state and local governments. As you might be aware, we are experiencing increased numbers of human-caused wildfires in Nevada. Additionally, I think we've all heard of wildfires that have been started by people in a negligent manner near our communities. Often, it is local governments that are the first to respond to wildfires, and they often bear the brunt of the costs associated with firefighting. Thankfully, they can receive assistance through the Wildland Fire Protection Program, which is housed in the Division of Forestry of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. After a devastating wildfire, it is important that the funds of the Wildland Fire Protection Program are not depleted, and that local governments tasked with putting out the wildfires can recover their costs. However, it was brought to our attention that arson investigators have found it extremely difficult for local governments to recover these costs from fire suppression efforts in both criminal and civil investigations. The same investigators have found that adjacent states are much more effective in cost recovery due to appropriate statutes. Our neighboring states, California, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, all have such statutes. In the Assembly, we amended the bill to provide certain exceptions for when a person, firm, association, or agency may be liable for the expenses incurred in extinguishing a fire or meeting an emergency. These are based on best practices and the experience of arson investigators like Terry Taylor, who have over 25 years of experience in this area. We wanted to ensure that true accidents were thoroughly considered in the pursuit of these recovery dollars. With the chair's permission, I would like to now have Mr. Taylor provide a more detailed background on the bill along with a section-by-section overview.
Please, and welcome to Government Affairs, Mr. Taylor. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, we have in Section 1, we're deleting the thing that has thwarted me through much of my career, along with my colleagues, which is language that says you must threaten human life. And it has been traditional that those of us in the fire service, the police service, and EMS service are not considered human unless we're greatly injured or deceased. So that has halted local district attorneys from taking these cases. I'm working a case right now in a rural county next to us where house was damaged, acreage was done, unpermitted fire brought into basically a grazing area. And because there were no human lives threatened at that time, other than firefighters and deputy sheriffs, there will be no movement forward for cost recovery. So that's a really good nutshell example of what we're trying to solve. In Section 2, and you'll see it repeated all through the bill, it talks about the exceptions. Working with the Assemblywoman here and my colleagues, we have no problem. The fire marshals in the northern half of the state have absolutely no problem with these exceptions. There is one challenge that I learned last night in talking to the state forester fire warden, which is they no longer issue burn permits per se. So that permitting has actually been devolved to local counties, towns, cities, that sort of thing. So that's one thing I just discovered, didn't submit any paperwork. because it was too late in the game. But we need to fix that, and we need to refer the language back to the local jurisdiction, whether it's a fire protection district, a municipal fire department, or some other as defined. The amendments put in basically that a person has to be cognizant of the forecast and existing weather conditions, the conditions of the fuel moisture, and the topography of the area of the fire. So if you're going to put fire on the ground, those are basic things that you should be concerned with. And the ranching community was very concerned about this, so they didn't want to get caught up in this. And I have to say that in my 26 years in Douglas County and in this region, I've had very, very few out-of-control fires from ranchers burning off stubble and having the field, ready for spring. And then as we continue on down there, we put some stuff in there about that I felt very strongly about, so did my colleagues, that you need to call a fire department when you lose control of a fire. Okay? And we have people not doing that. I'm investigating a case like that right now where, for the jurisdiction that I'm employed by at North Lake Tahoe, where in fact we had a fire, there was no reporting, there was an attempt to suppress it, and what was basically something simple turned into 8 or 9 acres up in the Lake Tahoe Basin. And so that person would in fact, if this were passed, would in fact we would be able to recover from that individual. The other thing is, I hate to say it after all these years I've been doing it, is that people lie to us constantly about how the fire started and whatever. And if somebody ever wants to join me in a beer hall, some of the things I've been told are really humorous, but untrue. And so I think it's really important that people step up to the plate and say, yes, I started this fire, yes, this is what I did, and I called the fire department right away. And it's been my experience regionally that the local district attorneys are quite happy with this. I've talked to mine in Douglas and in Carson. They're quite happy with the idea if the person reports, tries to put the fire out, and is truthful to investigators, that they're not going to try and go and get a lot of money out of them. My father used to say you can't squeeze blood out of a stone. So, and we also know that some of these people that get involved in this have little or no financial resources. The idea isn't to bankrupt people, it's to get them to, if you do something, even if it's stupid or illegal, if you call, participate truthfully, you're going to get somewhat of a free ride. There's still criminal implications with other statutes, but that was the idea. And then I heard from our ranchers about warming fires, and I also heard about livestock issues. Most of the livestock industry now that I'm familiar with has gone to electric branding rather than branding fires, but we still have operations out there in the rural areas where we're still doing branding fires. And in most cases, those fires, if they do get away, they're reported, and there's certainly attempts to put them out because they're harming their own grazing grounds. And then we finally have a good definition of what a firefighting agency is, and it includes all of the 2 types of special districts from NRS 318 and NRS 474, and it finally includes municipal fire departments, which we didn't have. So that really is the summation of my testimony on this bill. There was a number of us that brought the idea to the committee, and I am very thankful that the committee picked it up and that we've gotten this far. And I am especially grateful to the Assemblywoman next to me. Her neighborhood is, twice in my career, has come very close to disappearing in fire. We had the one in November, and which I was part of the investigative team on that, and that's still ongoing. And we had the one 9 years ago in Collin Ranch. And Collin Ranch is a perfect example of where you wouldn't get an exception if some individual had started that fire and had not reported it and had not tried to suppress it, and then when discovered through investigation begins to lie about it. And that's the exit door for being treated nicely. And my colleagues feel that that is reasonable and that most people that care about their community, and that's been my experience, will step up to the plate and basically say, this is what happened. So hopefully that answers the ideas about what are going on with the amendments.
Thank you very, very much for that information. You are right. We think a lot of our Assemblywoman Peters. She's full of incredible knowledge, so we're glad that she's here as well. And I know just enough about this to be dangerous because I have a brother who's done quite a bit of firefighting over the years in the forestry department. So with that, any questions? Senator Gokachia?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I guess we were kind of joking as we got into this, if you had a controlled campfire for the purpose of branding calves, I guarantee you if you're welding on a water trough and the fire gets away, you're going to throw a branding iron in it. So I was hoping maybe we could expand that just a little bit and say, maybe if it was some, instead of just narrowing it right to branding, maybe if it was, husbandry or incidents of husbandry that pertain to the life, there's far more chance of starting a fire trying to thaw a pipe out that was froze, if the conditions were right in the winter, to get water to livestock, or like I said, maybe welding or fixing on a trough and have that fire get away from you. I guarantee you they're going to call the fire department, they're going to fight the fire, but again, these are things that happen out there, and if there was some way we could amend that just beyond the branding. Otherwise, you're going to make everybody pack a branding iron, Terry. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Senator, for the comment. Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. I worry about expanding this too far beyond the kind of narrowed specific scenarios. Because like you said, in the case of somebody incidentally starting a fire due to welding or other activities that are a part of the process of husbandry in our rural communities, they would be following the kind of guidelines we've outlined in here for exceptions of being held liable. And so we built those in order to kind of cover those scenarios. The Girl Scout troop that went out and started a fire and a pine cone got a little away from the fire. Those kinds of scenarios that are incidental and not purposeful and can impact anybody. But we don't want those folks to be caught in the idea or caught in cases where they would be held liable definitively. So we offered these exemptions to cover those kinds of cases. I mean, we could go case by case, right, and try and over regulate in the statute who would apply or in what scenario would apply and what wouldn't. But we really wanted to give it the consideration that we know our investigators already take, but put that into statute so it's more transparent and consistent, and people have that recognition of accountability. What are my accountability metrics to make sure that I'm covering my bases in the case of an accident?
All right, I thank you. Just a comment. I was just trying to protect my industry a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gokachia. I was actually thinking when he said electric branding, I was like, they must have a really long extension cord. I was just teasing. Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for bringing this bill. And Mr. Taylor, it's good to see you. Appreciated working with you in the past. I did a little research this year, and I got from some of our state fire officials that from 2015 through 2019, there were 397 wildland fires in Nevada caused by fireworks, and that the cost of fighting those wildland fires started by fireworks went into the above 11 million, if not higher. If this bill passes, do you think that trying to recover some of those costs for people who use fireworks that are not legal in the counties where those fires are set for the fire agencies will happen? There'll be able to be any more recovery?
For the record, Terry Taylor, Senator Orenshaw, you and I share the same opinion about illegal fireworks and even some legal fireworks because they can't get a permit for using fireworks other than commercial fireworks under state law. It's our opinion, the investigators felt that fireworks fires could be successfully sought for the person using the fireworks, that you could get cost recovery. More interestingly, it was brought up to me in just kind of a wacky way, how does that affect a corporation that manufactures fireworks? So, you know, that's an open thing. That wasn't what we were focused on, but we were focused on individuals or groups or businesses or whatever that are creating fires. We know that in our state, about 80% of the wildfires are human caused, one way or another. And so, and some of those are just, they're accidents, okay? And some of them are intentional, and some of them are so stupid, they should not be called accidents. And that's, we had the Pine Fire here recently, where the guy in this last August is shooting off fireworks, you know, out by Mount Peavine. So we feel very comfortable that that cost recovery is there and that the criminal charges are there. And we're finding these people and we're locating them and we're seizing stuff. But it would be nice to be able to do cost recovery.
Well, thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank you, Assemblyman Peters, for bringing the bill. I hope that it helps reduce those fires set by fireworks.
Thank you very much. Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on, this language shows up in several places. It's in Section 1, and then it's also in Section 2. This is existing language. You've inserted the city general improvement districts, which are the fire protection districts. But how exactly does this work with the, when you have an implied contract that's not expressed and this is triggered? Because this is existing law, so I want you to help me understand how the implied contract piece works now.
So basically, it was our belief in creating the exceptions, which is, I believe, what we're really talking about. Am I correct, Senator?
Well, this is the part where it's saying that, you know, basically the debt can be collected by, and then you've had inserted several, and then it says incurring such expenses in the same manner as in the case of an obligation under a contract express or implied. And so an implied contract is very different than express, right? And so I just want to know how does that work now, since that's existing language, and there is a debt collection activity under an implied contract?
So in talking to the district attorney's representatives before we even brought this forward to the Wildland Fire Committee, the idea was that since local governments are issuing permits for the legitimate legal activity, and in those permits they have express and implied conditions, that those permits would be the four square corners of an actual contract. That was how it was explained to me. I should know better. I'm married to an attorney, but that was their view of it. That since a permit would be issued for anything lawful, that becomes express, and then the implication is that you are going to follow those guidelines.
And then, quick follow-up. So on the truthfulness piece, which is, so after they finished responding to the questions by the fire warden, you know, so is the truthfulness decided by just a single individual, or is it decided by multiple people to determine whether or not liability will then immunity will then attach? For the truthfulness?
For the record, Terry Taylor. So in discussing with the district attorneys that I talked to in this region that would be prosecuting these both civilly and criminally, all of them said that the measure of truthfulness is an objective test rather than subjective. So that would mean that if a person is lying about the act itself, the actus reus, that they, in other words, they're saying, hey, I didn't have any fireworks, I didn't do this, and it's proven to be untrue, that then forms the basis for the legal action. Okay. And I hope I answered your question.
You did, and then I just have one final question, which is on Section 4. and Section 3. So 244 is the county, 268, I believe, is the cities. So, and 474, I'm curious about the court of competent jurisdiction. So within the county language, which is 244 and 268, you want them to bring the action in the court of competent jurisdiction, but I don't see the same application under 474 or 472. So there's that. It just appeared to be two different kinds of standards, but I think maybe I did see it. No, I only saw the court. I think that court language was in the 318, which was the fire district fees.
To the senator through the chair, it basically, it also is under the city council. So if you look, basically the idea was that if you had a smaller event and you were seeking civil redress, that your court of competent jurisdiction would be a municipal court if it was in an incorporated city. If it was in Senator Gogochia's county, it would be a justice court. And so that was what we were thinking about, is where would you go for a smaller event? For a larger event in excess of $50,000, you would wind up in the district court in an attempt for civil recovery.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've lost a couple members. We've got people going in and out presenting bills in other committees. So I guess my question is, first of all, how often are these small events? Because I always feel like fires just get out of control. And that's what we're trying to work on here. So do we actually have those smaller events like the municipal court events?
For the record, Terry Taylor. So the typical wildland fire that we are actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis rarely exceeds 20 acres. And I'm talking now in the western Nevada region. In the central portion of the state, or in eastern portion of the state, they will tend to grow bigger because there's fewer resources immediately available. So a lot of this stuff could be handled in the smaller fires, unpermitted, in justice court. And I'll kind of throw something out here the Assemblywoman is aware of. You're going to be looking at AB 100, which also includes the Wildfire Protection Plan. So a perfect example is the last Collin Ranch fire, the Pine Haven fire, lasted in excess of 24 hours. Therefore, that funding source was used by the Reno Fire Department to come forth and pay off the cost and the cost of all the other agencies putting the fire out. So that's kind of an unusual case because possibly NV Energy started that fire. But the idea basically is that this bill can help local government feed money back to that fund. And that's one of the things I've been looking at. My former fire district, East Fork Fire, we had the neighbors fire. And we're on the hook for a big chunk of money, okay? Plus, we received a big chunk of money from that program. And our fees will rise each year to pay, in effect, pay back the fund. So if the investigators and the local DAs and the city attorneys are willing to one, fund themselves, okay, and in recovering costs, and two, when you get into a larger fire where the large fund is done, when I worked the Collin Ranch fire, the first one 9 years ago, I went to the city attorneys and the district attorneys in Washoe County because all of them had expended money, and I was part of a task force that put together the litigation against NV Energy. And so what basically happened was we couldn't use any of this law to bring those local agencies in so that they could participate with what the insurance companies were doing. And that just, to me, that just seemed absolutely wrong, that the taxpayers were funding this large operation. The insurance companies were recovering, and NV Energy was admitted their guilt in court. And so that part of this, what we were doing here, is money feeding backwards from a local level back into the state fund. So I wanted to just kind of tie two things together here that you're going to be looking at today, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. It was helpful. Any additional questions? Senator Gocochea, please.
Thank you, and I'll try and be brief. We've got a long night in front of us yet. But I'm just kind of concerned, and I'll be honest with you, the language says willfully or negligently causing a fire. But, clearly that's an accident. It's easy if you lose a fire, and it is an accident, you do start one, but it probably was at least some type of negligence. And yet, as we look at it down here, if you fail to exercise reasonable care, we get fire control orders, burn orders all the time from the federal agencies. In fact, in some places in eastern Nevada, they're already in effect, no open fires. So typically, if the federal agencies have issued a burn order and you're out there doing something and you start a fire, then it's pretty easy to prove negligence. And so I'm just kind of nervous that there is the ability here for someone really to get stuck with a huge bill and just out there trying to make a living. So I get concerned about that, and I'm just voicing those concerns.
And Terry Taylor, for the record, this doesn't parallel anything that like BLM's fire trespass program or any of that stuff is doing. The focus is strictly on local government and ultimately, if it's a large fire, recovering money for the fund that could be done by a local district attorney or even a private attorney if a county commission or a city council wanted to retain one, and have that money feed back into the state. So I wanted to make that clear that was our intent all along, because the federal government can kind of do what they want, as you know, Senator.
Right, and clearly looking at the bill, if you're going to have an activity out there, in a jurisdiction, you probably would be wise to go to the county and pull a permit if it's something you had to do in the normal course of business, and get a permit from the county so you had that protection, because they clearly can issue it. And that would be my recommendation. If you have to be out there and there is a chance that you would could start a fire, you probably better have a permit, or you could have a hell of a bill. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right, not seeing any. Assemblywoman or Mr. Taylor, do you have any follow-up right this minute, or do you want us to go to support, opposition, and neutral?
I think if the committee has felt their questions are answered, we are happy to move on to testimony. I do, however, need to step out. I have another bill that I am presenting in natural resources on our other side. So I will leave you in the capable hands of Mr. Terry Taylor, and I really just appreciate your time today on considering this piece of legislation.
Thank you very much, and yes, you are excused. Thank you. Broadcasting, we will go ahead and go to a public testimony in support of Assembly Bill 86.
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to testify in support of AB 86, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 294. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 294. Please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. Please begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. It's CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. The City of Reno would like to offer its support to AB 86 today. This allows the city to consider court action against responsible parties for willfully or negligently causing a wildfire. We've seen how destructive wildfires can be and the high cost it takes to fight them in order to protect our community. The bill provides an additional tool for the city, both as a deterrent for these situations, as well as a tool in the most egregious situations when a party is found at fault. Thanks for the opportunity to testify this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And next caller, please.
If you've recently just joined us, we are currently in support of AB 86. To testify in support, please press star 9 now. Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 86, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 86, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Taylor, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I do believe that we need to do is we need to fix the issue that's in there about the state forester fire warden issuing permits. I think that's going to lead people the wrong direction, as according to Casey, who I spoke to last night. And basically, we could insert some language that would say something along the line of your local authority having jurisdiction. And I think that would solve the problem, whether it's a county commission, a city council, a town board, whatever. All in all I can say is that I think this will give investigators and district attorneys, city attorneys, town attorneys, et cetera, a tool in the toolbox. They're elected officials too, and I've noticed in the 20-something years, I've been doing this 26 years now, that they really have a pretty good judge of people who to go after. You know, we were kind of thrown a curve with the Girl Scout thing, I have to say, and I can't imagine a district attorney being reelected going after a Girl Scout troop for something something that happened accidentally out in the woods. And we're trying to sever true accidents from people that are misbehaving. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. I just finished investigating a fire, permitted, got away. The guy told us what happened. I was able to validate it. Dust devil, okay? Temperature imbalance between the floor and the atmosphere took the fire, caused 14 acres. So that is a big, it's a zero. When the crews got there, they didn't know what had gone on. It looked like a controlled burn had gotten out of control. But once we were able to go through everything and we were able to validate the weather, hey, no harm, no foul, that's what we're paid for and volunteer for as volunteer firefighters. So I think it can work, and I think normal, sound people will do it. We're not out there to beat people over the head. We are out there to educate and to stop these fires. There's too much of them going on.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for your time today. With that, I will close Assembly Bill 86. And Ms. Casey and Mr. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind waiting through, we need to take Senator Scheibel so she can get on her way, and then we'll double back to Assembly Bill 100 if you don't mind. Thank you. Welcome, Senator Scheibel, to Government Affairs. Good to see you. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Well, thank you so much. It is great to be here in Government Affairs. I miss serving on this committee, which I had the privilege of doing last session. And for the record, my name is Melanie Scheibel. I am the State Senator representing District 9 in Clark County, and I'm happy to be here today presenting Assembly Bill 84, which authorizes the State Forester Fire Warden with certain approval to enter into public-private partnerships to address the threat of catastrophic wildfires. With me today to present the bill is Jana Moan, Director of External Affairs with the Nature Conservancy, and with the Chair's permission, I'll first provide a brief background and summary of the bill before I turn it over to the co-presenters. By way of background, Assembly Bill 84 was proposed by the committee to conduct an interim study concerning wildfires. It was my pleasure to serve as the vice chair of the committee during the 2019-2020 interim. And it was created by Assembly Concurrent Resolution 4 of the 2019 session. The committee was tasked with considering methods of reducing wildfire fuels, issues relating to early responses to wildfires, and the economic impact of wildfires on the state and local communities. I trust by now that you have heard enough about the Wildfire Study Committee or Commission from the interim, and that I can move through some of the lessons that we learned and general science that we were educated on, because you all understand the need for policies addressing wildfires in Nevada. So let me just get straight to what AB 84 does. As we look into the future, the threat of catastrophic wildfires only increases. So Assembly 84 seeks to authorize the state to enter into public-private partnerships. Specifically, without limitation, they can invest in wildfire prevention, restoration, infrastructure, and workforce development for enhancing landscape resiliency against the threat of wildfires. I understand that Mr. Lee is also here to present an amendment to the bill that would include the purchase or investment in wildfire camera systems. And there are some particular companies who do excellent work in this field of technology. I also want to acknowledge that I have another meeting and I will be stepping out with the chair's permission. But if you have any questions that I can answer that my co-presenters cannot, well then you have really outdone yourself, but I will answer it for you. And with that, may I turn it over to Ms. Moen?
You may.
Thank you.
And welcome to Government Affairs. And if you need to leave and go to your next meeting, you are excused. And thank you for joining us. And this is a little bit like musical chairs today. So, welcome, Ms. Moen. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you to Senator Scheibel for that introduction. Chair Dondero Loop and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Jana Moen, and I am the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. As Senator Scheibel noted, AB 84 originated from the Interim Committee to conduct a study on wildfire. We thank that committee for their work in the interim. Their hearings daylighted a number of opportunities for enhancing wildfire prevention, readiness, response, and restoration efforts. As the committee was wrapping up its meetings, Assemblywoman Heidi Swank asked the Nature Conservancy if we had any ideas that would help the state address the issue of wildfire, but that did not require a financial outlay. At that time, we were in the thick of the COVID pandemic, and the outlook for the state revenue was grim, as it still is. Assembly Bill 84 was one of the ideas that resulted from our discussion with Assemblywoman Swank in response to this question, and I'm pleased to be here today to co-present AB 84. So for the next few minutes, I want to share why we think public-private partnerships are a useful tool for addressing wildfire threat. Public-private partnerships, or PPPs, are financial and legal arrangements that use private investment to fund or provide public goods or services. PPPs are frequently used to develop transportation and infrastructure projects. In Nevada, there are 3 places in statute that we have found that authorize public-private partnerships. Number 1, NRS 338 authorizes PPPs for transportation facilities. NRS 321 authorizes them for the preservation and adaptive reuse of historic properties. And in NRS 408-357, they were approved to complete the Boulder City Bypass project. In these instances, PPPs were established to help finance large infrastructure or renovation projects. With AB 84, we are proposing that they can also be used to address wildfire threat. We know we need to reduce fuel loads and enhance healthy soils in our forests and rangelands. These activities are large natural infrastructure endeavors. So the rationale behind AB 84 is that a public-private partnership model can help leverage public funds with private investment in wildfire threat reduction and landscape resiliency enhancement. We've done a little research into how public-private partnerships have been used to address wildfire threat, and we found that they are a multi-purpose tool. They can be used to enhance wildfire prevention and readiness efforts by directly deploying on-the-ground conservation crews. For example, in 2010, the city of Auburn, California used a PPP to mobilize local volunteers and conservation corps for forest thinning projects. PPPs have also been used to provide direct wildfire response with both equipment and operation support. For example, in San Diego in 2013, utilities and the company Erickson Air Crane joined agencies through public-private partnerships to provide helitanker equipment and manpower to support wildfire suppression operations. PPPs have also been successfully used to implement forest restoration on a large landscape level. Effective forest restoration treatments seek to avoid stand replacing fires by reducing fuel loads through mechanical treatments and prescribed fire. But to be effective, forest restoration needs to be done at a large scale, and it requires substantial investment. The National Forest Foundation has helped establish public-private partnerships to provide long-term funding for forest restoration work, and I would like to explain 2 examples of successful efforts. First is the Yuba Fund in Sierra County, California, which is a partnership between the Yuba Water Authority, the Tahoe National Forest, an NGO called Blue Forest Conservation, and the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. The PPP is funded by a forest resilience bond financed by collective contributions from partners and has taken the lead on implementing projects on over 5,000 acres in the Yuba River watershed. Projects are designed to reduce surface and ladder fuels to a level that would allow for safe fire suppression and improved wildlife habitat. The second example is the Northern Arizona Forest Fund, where a power and water utility, the Salt River Project, partnered with the National Forest Foundation to implement forest restoration projects in the headwaters of the Salt and Verde rivers that are a source of drinking water for the Phoenix metro area. The source of revenue for the Forest Fund is a mixture of public and private revenue generated from forest restoration investment packages. The fund is used to implement on-the-ground restoration and fuel reduction projects. The PPP model is also being used to enhance resiliency in rangelands. In 2020, a public-private partnership called the Cheatgrass Challenge was launched in Idaho. In this inaugural year, the challenge selected 6 restoration projects in sagebrush habitat to receive a total of $750,000 of investment generated from a mix of federal and state agency funds and private investments. In addition to establishing innovative funding mechanisms for forest and rangeland restoration, these public-private partnerships help provide jobs and they connect communities to their watersheds. I want to acknowledge that an amendment to AB 84 is being proposed by Alert Wildfire Systems. We consider this a friendly amendment that can help strengthen early wildfire detection efforts, thus further enhancing our ability to prevent and fight catastrophic wildfire. In closing, we think that public-private partnerships are a useful mechanism for addressing the threat of wildfire in both our forests and our rangelands. AB 84 will give Nevada's fire warden the ability to enter into and manage public-private partnerships, and it will be another tool in our box for tackling this complex problem. We hope that you will support this bill. Thank you for having us here today, and we're happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much for that information. Questions from the committee? Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on the public-private partnerships piece. I guess the expectation of, the dollar amount that you're expecting, because you have in the back of the bill, it's a short bill, but you have workforce development, and you also have the investment in the wildfire prevention. And so what I'm wondering, what are you expecting to get in terms of money from the private-public partnership? And then why isn't the workforce development piece tied to existing government programs?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for that question. Chair Dondero looped through you to Senator Neal. The number amount, the dollar amount for the public-private partnerships really varies on the purpose for that specific public-private partnership. This bill is just giving the ability for the fire warden to enter into those public-private partnerships should she deem it necessary to do so. And so it's not necessarily allocating a specific funding for a specific project. It's just giving the ability for the fire warden to enter into those. And the way that the money is raised, it's different for different public-private partnerships, but it's typically an investment among all of the partners in that public-private partnership. So the private partners bring some investment, and that's matched by a public investment. And then so the revenue revenue is shared, but then also typically there's committees that decide on how that money is spent among those private partnerships as well. So I hope that answers your question. It's really a tool, at least for rangeland and forest restoration, to be able to pursue those larger pots of funding. That's not a burden on any one person, but can help us achieve larger natural infrastructure plans.
Yeah, it does, but I guess just, just for my information, who are you considering getting into, who are the private companies that, or individuals that you guys are thinking about getting into partnerships with?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for the question, and through you, Chair Dondera Loop, to Senator Neal. That's a good question, and we provided this suggestion as just with our knowledge of public-private partnerships that have worked, such as those that I cited, as a way that Nevada can approach this issue of wildfire threat. We don't have too many specific public-private specific projects in mind. The Nature Conservancy does do a number of forest restoration projects, both on our own property up in the Sierra Nevada range. We do our own controlled burns up there, but then we also partner with the Forest Service in the Tahoe area, and then we also partner with other partners in the rangelands and the sagebrush to implement various land restoration projects that both have the goal of understanding the dynamics of how the land is responding to wildfire threat and climate change and the threats that approach those, but that also help us develop solutions for managing those. So the one thing that we have noticed in our work at the Nature Conservancy is we've mapped out the wildfire threat to the Truckee River watershed. And we've identified several areas that we can target for treatment that would be really effective in not only reducing the risk of replacing fire, but also reducing the risk of the sediment load that would run off of our landscape post-fire. And it's in this work that we have come to understand the value of pre-restoration treatments in our forested lands. And those involve mechanical thinning. They are typically very expensive, and they typically take a number of years to really effectively implement a large area of land and treat a large area of land. And so knowing that, and knowing that we have an issue in the state that is essentially really hard to meet our revenue, there's more need than there is revenue to meet that need. We proposed this as a potential solution for just another tool in the toolbox for opening it up. It really wasn't directed at a specific project. And then I didn't answer your question about workforce, but workforce is key to treating our forests and our rangelands. We can not only employ more people and use more jobs, but these jobs to treat forests are jobs. And so we feel that there's a workforce development component piece into that, and then that can also feed into workforce development opportunities on our rangelands, especially if we really look into research and development opportunities for enhancing the health of our rangelands to be more resilient against fire. So those are kind of some of the areas that we were thinking would be receiving investment.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Other questions? Senator Gokachia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there's a piece of legislation that's pending right now. We changed who is the state forester, fire warden. I'm trying to remember, did we go from the state fire marshal back to Casey Casey, or did we take it from Casey Casey? There's a bill pending that gives somebody that title, changes who is the state forester, fire warden. So I'm just trying to get that right in my own mind. I thought maybe it went to the fire marshal now.
Ms. Clarkson?
For the record, this is Heidi Clarkson. I would need to search out what that bill does, where that bill is. Certainly, when this bill was drafted or requested from the wildfire study, we were dealing with a state forester fire warden, because that's the position that's currently existing. Oftentimes, though, during session, I know things change, or we're dealing with bills, and we to the extent that another bill would conflict, we do deal with that. But I'll double check to see the status of the state forester fire warden.
I believe we made the state fire marshal now the fire warden, but I'm not sure. I saw that bill someplace.
I believe we will be hearing from Ms. Casey, so maybe she can answer all that for us. Additional questions? Ms. Moen, I believe we have Ms. Casey on the line there, and if you wouldn't mind, would you be able to address that question for us, please?
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden. I'm not aware of a bill that changes the title over to the State Fire Marshal. We did have a portion of SB 33, which was removing some of the duties from the State Forester Fire Warden to the Fire Marshal's office as it related to the WUI code, but those have been stricken, so I'm not aware of a title change bill.
I'm sorry, you would know, Ms. Casey, so you are the state forester fire warden at this point, and will be.
Thank you for the question. Again, for the record, Casey, I think so. I don't have any ownership of the title, but that is how it's listed in the statute. So anyway, it works out.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, today you're that person, so we're going with it. Any additional questions from the committee? I believe we may have somebody in the audience who needs to add an amendment to this bill, and in the absence of Senator Scheibel, I will call forward Mr. Lee. Go ahead when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Awfully nice to see you and be here with you today. And my name's Keith Lee. I'm here today on behalf of the Alert Wildfire Systems DPA Wildfire Live. If I may just jump ahead with your permission, Madam Chair, and to Senator Neal's question or dialogue with Ms. Moen, I can tell you that how it works in California very effectively is the independently owned utilities over there are part of the public-private partnership with the CDF and the camera folks. The first fire camera ever placed in the state of Nevada back in 1913 was really 2013 was really a private sector Alert Tahoe folks that funded the camera. So there's a lot of NGOs out there that can participate in this. They all have their own particular interests, of course. But this, I think, AB 84, and we testified in support of it on the Assembly side, certainly supported here, it's a very important tool. We've seen some limited success with it, and hopefully this will open up to greater success in terms of the private NGOs and others getting involved in assisting the state in its fire suppression, detection, et cetera, efforts. So I just put that in there if I may. Again, Madam Chair, good afternoon, and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here. As I said, my name is Keith Lee. I represent Alert Wildfire Systems, DBA Wildfire Live. You may, if I may, call your attention to SB 180 that this committee heard, I think on March 17th. You had a more detailed presentation by Dr. Graham Kent, who is the founder of, who is the director of the Nevada Seismology Lab, who founded these cameras. He and his staff founded these cameras and put them in place. And I'll call your attention to that presentation, as well as the PowerPoint. I think it was an 18-page PowerPoint that showed the cameras and in operation and that sort of thing, and would also indicate that if you have some interest, that there's a website, alertwildfire.org, that actually allows you to see the cameras that are in place, and you can see the time lapse, and they've been very effective. As I said, the fire camera system started in 1913 with a single camera on Snow Valley Peak here in the Carson Range that was funded by the Alert Tahoe folks. It is now expanded to more than 800 cameras in 5 states. with another 200 to 300 to be deployed this year. And we have just now entered into an agreement in Australia where we've now deployed 6 cameras in Australia. So this is obviously a going concern that is very effective in early detection. The presentation before Assemblywoman Peters' bill, the Pine Haven fire, that was located 2 seconds or 1.2 seconds after the 9/11 call came in. One of our cameras across the valley from the fire detected that and confirmed that. So it's a very important tool. And what we're proposing here in this amendment, and first let me thank Senator Scheibel and Ms. Moen and Ms. Casey and Kyle Davis in some rapid response to my request to have this added yesterday afternoon. What I've done here is I've taken the liberty of taking language out of SB 180 that did not move from this committee to include into this bill. And essentially what it does is it amends 472.040.2 sub F to add language, and it's posted on Nellis, but you can see that the blue language is simply enabling language to enable the state forester fire warden to include in her arsenal of weapons against wildland fires the ability to purchase or acquire cameras or other equipment necessary for early warning or detection of wildfires. I stress acquiring cameras because, again, we are not asking for any kind of a appropriation to purchase these cameras, but there's ability, and I think Ms. Casey has testified previously and probably will say so today, that right now there's the ability dealing with the state or with the federal government and with private sector and certainly with NV Energy in this state, where money can be leveraged both from the private sector and from NGOs and others to acquire and install these fire cameras. So it's again another tool in Ms. Casey's arsenal to fight these wildfires, and we're not requesting appropriation, nor do we think it's appropriate to do so. But again, I think it recognizes the value of these fire cameras and certainly adds another tool to the arsenal. With that, Madam Chair, I'll try to answer any questions you or other members of the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. I'm going to start because when we heard this bill, I think my biggest concern is not the acquired by donation supplies material. My biggest concern was the word purchase. And whenever you put purchase in there, there's dollar signs behind it, whether we say there are or not. And so I would just question or ask you what the purpose of the word purchase is there.
Excuse me, Keith Lee for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, it's language that, again, adding another additional tool. I mean, right now we understand obviously that the general fund is overstretched right now, and we have a lot of issues we have to deal with. But the idea is that if in the future, if this body should decide through its money committees and through the full body itself that there's appropriate funds necessary or available rather, and if the state officials, the DCNR folks, and the forester fire warden would say, yes, we think now with some additional, that there's the availability of funds, and we'll make a request to have those funds appropriated. It simply is I think, just again, part of the tools that we want to be able to give to the state forester fire warden in the event that funds were available down the road. This is not something, as I said, it is not our intent, and I don't speak for DCNR or Ms. Casey, but I don't suspect they have a desire to chase some dollars this session to acquire cameras. But again, it's just the ability that in future times, if it's available, if it makes sense to do so, that we have the ability to do so. It's not something that is necessarily going to go forward with any degree of being definitive. So with that, again, it's just another tool in the forester fire warden's tool kit.
Thank you very much. And I'll let others go and ask questions, but we may want to consider amending the amendment if we're going to put the word purchase in, because I'm not sure whether that would be grabbed by finance or not. So with that, any additional questions, Senator Neal? Senator Hansen? Awful quiet down there. Senator Gokachia? Okay, everybody's good.
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Madam Chair. I
right,
appreciate it.
thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you.
And with that, Ms. Casey, did you want to weigh in on any of that? Okay, you just want to stay out of the line of fire? Haha. Okay. All righty, thank you very much. Well, with that, then we will go to our public testimony of support, opposition, and neutral. And broadcasting, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of AB 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 092, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Senators. My name is Tiffany East, Tiffany-East, and I'm the chairwoman of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners. The Wildlife Commission unanimously supports AB 84 as presented. While the Commission has not yet reviewed the friendly amendment, we did support previous bill SB 180. You've heard a lot about wildfire this afternoon, so I'm just going to touch on a few points from our perspective. We agree that providing the state forest or fire warden with the tools necessary to access essential resources to limit the loss of habitat for our wildlife or implement restoration projects to provide much-needed help to the ecosystem where our wildlife live is critical to their survival. Many of the state's wildfires have destroyed much-needed habitat and forage for our wildlife, especially our sagebrush obligates. We encourage you to support AB 84. Thank you so much for your time and consideration for this very important bill.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 155, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of AB 84. We are also supportive of the proposed amendment and believe that early detection is key to ensuring that wildfires are kept under control and properly extinguished. Science tells us that climate change is making the West hotter and drier, contributing to larger, more intense wildfires. And last year's fire season set new records in terms of geographic scale, fire intensity, and rate of spread. These wildfires have disastrous impacts on natural areas and wildlife habitat, and the pollution effects from the smoke are hazardous to our health. Encouraging collaboration, partnerships, and early detection will help our state better mitigate and respond to wildfires. We urge the committee support on AB 84. Thank you for your time.
Next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 732, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Davis, Kyledavis, and I appear today on behalf of the Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. We are here in support of the bill as well as the amendment that has been offered today. We do think that that early detection of wildfires is incredibly important for the protection of wildlife habitat. In the interest of time, I would just echo Ms. East's statements today and would urge the committee's support for both the bill and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
If you've recently just joined us, we are currently in support of AB 84. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close the hearing unless Ms. Moen has any closing comments.
I just want to say thank you so much to the committee for hearing this bill. I also just, as we were talking, and per Senator Neal's questions, I just went really briefly and looked at some past records for projects that we've identified at the Nature Conservancy for large natural infrastructure, forest reduction, fuel reduction projects. One's in the Mount Rose corridor and one's in the Truckee River watershed. And these projects are ones that we've been working on for a while. And one of the holdups is that there's little funding to be spread around for projects. And these projects have a combined total of about $5.5 million is what we estimate the cost for both of these projects to be. It would protect our water resources, it would protect our forest health, it would protect our communities from wildfire. And these costs are huge and exorbitant. And any way that we can find to spread the cost out over a larger portion with multiple people contributing in a public-private partnership is really what we're interested in with this bill. Those are just two examples of how it could be used. And we've heard many more and very much appreciate the testimony and the support testimony from others. And I very much appreciate the committee's time today in hearing this bill. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 84, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 100. And Mr. Taylor, are you back in the queue?
Not officially, Madam Chair.
Okay. We're going to call you up. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. So we've got Ms. Casey on the line, and she's going to also assist. So we'll let her start. Ms. Casey, go ahead when you're ready, and you have Mr. Taylor here if you need a backup plan.
Thank you. Good evening now, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Casey Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Nevada Division of Forestry. Thank you for having me here today to provide testimony on Assembly Bill 100 as proposed by the Interim Committee to conduct an interim study concerning wildfires in the 80th session of the Nevada Legislature. I will provide background for the sections being proposed in NDF statute, which is NRS 472. Section 2 allows the State Forester Fire Warden to enter into cooperative agreements each year with state, federal, and local agencies to ensure communication and coordination on fire suppression assets and safe and effective wildfire response across all jurisdictions. This is currently facilitated through the Nevada Fire Board of Directors. Section 2 would codify that partnership in statute to ensure that coordination among federal, state, and local jurisdictions remains a top priority to ensure the closest available wildfire response assets respond as quickly as possible via coordinated dispatch, are trained to the highest standards, and communicate in a timely and appropriate manner. Section 3 would establish Nevada's Wildland Fire Protection Program, or as you heard it earlier mentioned, the WFPP in statute. NDF has the authority to initiate these agreements with local fire jurisdictions under NRS 472-050. And the division began building these agreements following legislative approval in the 77th session of the Nevada Legislature. Participating counties and fire protection districts in the interim committee requested this program be specifically set forth in statute to provide program stability and longevity for participants. To maximize the value of the Wildland Fire Protection Program, it is important that all eligible jurisdictions become formal participants. Section 4 requires the state forester to work collaboratively with state, federal, and local agencies to identify and mitigate wildfire risks. restore and maintain landscape resiliency, create and maintain fire-adapted communities, and improve and support safe and effective wildfire response in Nevada. If Nevada is going to get ahead of the catastrophic loss of property, lives, infrastructure, and ecosystems resulting from wildland fires, all 4 areas must become the focus of work at a landscape scale to change fire behavior. This is consistent with NDF's primary strategic plan goals, the division's mission, and the shared stewardship agreement with our federal partners signed by Governor Sisolak in November of 2019. Section 5 allows the state forest or fire warden to provide meals to employees on certain critical natural resource projects and wildland fire responses. This would not apply to all natural resource projects. This would only apply to projects that are so distant from an NDF office that an unreasonable amount of time is wasted each day in travel status, delaying work and resulting in unnecessary per diem and overtime costs. Section 5 would allow NDF to camp on site and provide mobile kitchen units where deemed more economical for the project to provide meals. In addition to being more fiscally responsible, this proposal will increase the production rate of conservation crews and enhance staff safety, which otherwise greatly decreases because of drive times to and from projects. Section 5 also provides NDF mobile kitchen staff additional training needed for emergency response around the state. Section 6 requires the state forester fire warden to cooperate with state, federal, and local agency cooperators on fire restrictions in Nevada. This is current practice. However, solidifying the practice in statute will ensure consistency into the future. Thank you for your consideration of AB 100. I will stay until the presentation is complete to answer any questions. And for Section 9, I will pass it over to Nevada Insurance Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you very much. Insurance Commissioner Richardson, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Fire Warden Casey, and good evening, Chair Dondero Loop. Sorry for the sun here. I'm going to have to sort of lean this direction. So my name is Barb Richardson, and I'm the Insurance Commissioner for the state of Nevada, and I'm here to present just Section 9 of the Assembly Bill 100. So Section 9 is going to allow the Commissioner of Insurance the discretion to create an incentive program to promote and encourage property owners to take measures to mitigate the risk of property loss or damage caused by wildfire. The bill directs that the Commissioner must consult with the state forester fire warden to determine the mitigation measures that will be included in the incentive program described in the bill. So as additional comments, the division would like to note that while this bill focuses on individuals taking mitigation steps to help curb the devastating effects of wildfire, the division has concerns on the efficacy of solely focusing on individuals taking mitigation efforts for the incentive program. So I'd like to point on the record that while under the authority provided in Section 9, the division will actually be focusing on mitigating efforts taken by the whole community in a potentially affected area, as they are the efforts that would be most likely needed to have a statistically impactful decrease of the damage wildfire causes. The division itself is neutral on the passage of the bill, but I wanted to help frame the division's focus under the bill. So this concludes my portion of the introduction of AB 100, and I stand available for questions.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions for Ms. Casey, Ms. Richardson, or Mr. Taylor? Senator Neal, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the main question I have was on Section 9. What are the incentives that you think you're going to provide to promote this behavior?
So one of the, this is Barbara for the record, we actually talked about some of the incentive issues prior to this. And what we found is that if you follow what's happened in California, there are some incentive programs that can be put in place to actually have the insurance carriers support the community efforts and so that they get a mitigation break on the costs for the consumers. So I think that's the kind of program that we're going to be looking at. We've also worked with some of the other federal partners to try to figure out what kind of incentive programs would be helpful. And one of the focuses that we're probably going to be looking at specifically is that there is a human nature or human behavior that needs to be adjusted as far as making sure that folks know that there is a change in potential wildfire concerns in the western zones and the western states. So one of the focuses would be specifically on education. And if you put all of these in place, then the carriers themselves get to sell more insurance, basically, because they're not afraid of walking away from risks because the risks are more controlled than they are currently.
So, Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up. So okay, let's say, this is Liberty Mutual, right? And you say, okay, Liberty Mutual, we want you to get involved and offer these incentives to property owners. What do the property owners get? Do they get a reduction in the premium? Like what? Because if you say, well, you get a booklet that's getting ready to educate you on wildfires, you're just like, I think I'm getting gypped, right? Like I'm not, I'm making fun,
So
but
this is
I'm
why
serious.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, no, it's not a pamphlet. So the idea is to do much like they do with hurricanes out on the East Coast, and then the like Texas and Louisiana area is there are certain mitigation programs that get put in place by the not programs, but potential options or offerings that come from the insurance carriers. However, sometimes those mitigation efforts can't be done just by a single person. So they need to be a community change or a community-focused program. So if, for example, we were heading into the Tahoe area, we would look to all the insurance carriers who are servicing homes in that area to try to come up with mitigation efforts that would cross not just boundaries of making sure or having the potential of having a sprinkler system in your home, which would help a homeowner, but it wouldn't help the community. So there are community efforts that can be put in place that would actually help all the community members and also provide breaks and cost controls. And one would hope a decrease in premiums for the actual consumers themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Taylor, please.
If I can give a real-world example, homeowners association liability in the wildland-urban interface is very difficult to write and place with carriers, and we've had very good success with my fire department. Of course, we're a wealthier community. So what has happened is that when we've had carriers pull out of the HOA market with properties surrounded with big trees and a variety of brush types native to the area, the HOAs are able to come up with money. We match it with a $1,000 grant that comes from a third party. We use our own crews to come in, as well as there's also available for private crews to be used. A defensible space inspection is done, the work is completed, and then what we're finding is that the carrier, the HOA carrier, is happy then at that point that the common areas for the condo project or the apartments or the townhouses has been sufficiently protected. So what we found an incline is, that we've been doing this the last 30 years, is that we've been able to keep insurance in our community, even though we're very windy and very steep and we have lots of fuel.
Any additional questions? So I don't know who this is for, but is there I don't even know how to, is there a mandate for this Section 9, or is it just creating this information and encouraging this to happen? Mr. Taylor, you were just talking about, condos and apartments and things. Is there a mandate for them to have the insurance?
To my knowledge, all of those HOAs have and carry liability insurance. And they also carry property protection for the common areas and, of course, the exterior of the structures if they're condo, apartment, townhouse developments. What we have found up in Incline is we've used I guess you'd say a mix of public sector and private sector funding, which has included grants from insurance carriers such as State Farm. Haven't gotten anything from Liberty Mutual that I'm aware of in the last few years. And so that money is given to a property owner in reimbursement after the work is done. But basically, the property owners have to do it under the Wildland Urban Interface Code, which we've adopted and is now basically adopted statewide. So that's your balancing test there. And again, we're a wealthier community, so what's happened is we've had fundraisers, we've had other things, we've had neighbors helping neighbors, where you might have a couple that's elderly and doesn't have the financial resources, so it'll take care of it. The most you can get from any of our programs at North Lake Tahoe is a $1,000 stipend, if you will, towards the work that needs to be done. And we have 4 inspectors that are authorized to inspect vegetation. You can't get a sign off on any sort of home remodel or new construction unless you go through a defensible space inspection, and then really from that point on, my organization follows and makes sure the work gets done. And so we've had insurance carriers that have abandoned other areas due to wildfire, and we're a prime wildfire area. The prevailing winds hit us every day. And again, steep slopes, lots of fuel, big trees. We're not really having a problem renewing insurance.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments? All right. Thank you very much for all of you with your information. And with that, we'll go to testimony, and we'll start with support.
Sure thing, Chair. To testify in support on Bill AB 100, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is up and running. However, there are no callers at this time in support.
Thank you very much. Can we go to opposition?
To testify in opposition on Bill AB 100, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. Can we go to neutral?
To testify in neutral on Bill AB 100, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify neutral on Bill AB 100, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, you have no callers on neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, did we lose Miss Casey? There she is. Hey. Do you have any closing comments for us, please?
Thank you, Chair, again, for the record. Casey, State Forester, Briarwood. I don't have any closing comments. I just want to thank you all for your time today. As you all know, wildfire is a critical issue in the state of Nevada, not only to lives and property, but also to our ecosystems. And you've heard a lot of ways today in which we can help try to prevent and reduce that risk across the state. And I appreciate the time that you all took, and I also appreciate the interim committee on some of these ideas that came out. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your time as well. we know that it makes the day long for you as well. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 100. And with that, we have one item left, and that is public testimony or public comment. So if anybody is on the line for public comment, please join us.
Thank you, Chair. To speak in public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 577. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Chris Daly, D-A-L-Y, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. On Monday, 40 educators from across the state convened in Carson City for our Educator Lobby Day. Thank you to all of you who sat down and listened to educators this week. One of the concerns raised is the impact language included in SB 543, the new school funding formula, which raises the amount of ending fund balance walled off from collective bargaining to 16.6% of district operating budgets. Unless amended, this provision is set to go into effect on July 1st and would be one of the biggest anti-union shifts of the collective bargaining process in decades. First, a little bit of history. Back in the late 60s, teacher strikes and walkouts became increasingly common, both in Clark and Washoe. In response to this and a movement across the country, Republican Senator Carl Dodge brought forward Nevada's public sector collective bargaining process in NRS 288. This provided public employers and employees a process for discussion and resolution of differences regarding wages, hours, and conditions of employment, while ensuring that services to the public would continue without interruption. The collective bargaining process is designed to push parties to reach agreement whenever possible. This is accomplished through a series of proposals and counter-proposals where parties move towards agreement. It also includes binding arbitration with a last best offer package. If parties cannot reach agreement, either side can declare impasse. When this happens, parties present their proposals to an arbitrator who accepts either the employees or the employer's proposal, and both parties are bound to that decision. This process also requires parties to determine district's ability to pay for items before the arbitrator. This is why the issue of ending fund balance is so important. In most negotiations, ending fund balance is the main source of funds identified to cover proposals with a financial cost proposed by employee associations. This includes wages and benefits like health care and retirement, but it also includes many proposals related to workplace safety. If the 16.6% ending fund balance language goes unchanged during this legislative session, it will drastically slant bargaining in favor of employers, making it nearly impossible for employees to win even the most modest proposals through the collective bargaining process.
Thank you
This
very
amounts
much,
to a giant
Mr.
step backward
Daly.
for
You have
labor
reached your 2
and
minutes.
jeopardizes labor peace. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry we weren't able to have a hearing, but we'll keep talking about this through the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next caller.
Chair, your public line is open and working, and you have no more callers at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will adjourn, and we'll see you on Friday at 3:30.